It's been many months since I last played the game, but because of the 1,000 loyal supporters of the king, I've been encouraged to set out on this new adventure. So as day 1 started, I looked around the map for the right spot to put up my temporary house. Once I found the right location, I then placed a 5x5 stockpile to hold my inventory. I then started to chop down trees for wood and sticks. I then put a stick floor underneath my stockpile so my inventory doesn't get dirty. Once the flooring was done, I then put walls surrounding my stockpile. And as soon as the night fell, I also put one hay bed for David to sleep on. On the morning of day 2, I built a staircase and finished the flooring for the ground level. But I ran out of wood, so I went out to get some more. To progress through the game, I then made a research table. I also placed a campfire because David was getting hungry. Now more buildings require more wood, so I went out to get some more wood. On the morning of day 3, I noticed my dog retrieve multiple deer carcasses, and so I had David make a butcher's table so he can turn the carcasses into meat. David was feeling famished himself, and so I asked David to make a meal. After he had his hearty meal, I made David write chronicles until the end of day 3. In the morning of day 4, David woke up to a snowy morning. I then tasked him to harvest all the wild plants that he could, because during winter, all the plants will die. We can't say no to free real estate now, can we? Snow fell harder that day, and I had to finish the second floor. And so David got to work to get more wood. Unfortunately, the house was unfinished, and David had to sleep on the snowy ground. I'm sorry, David. In the morning of day 5, we were visited by a trader, and I traded my deer leather for an apple sapling, 7 coins, and an aged fine wine. And that same morning, David started to finish the walls on the second floor. I then asked him to make the flooring for the second floor, and in just a couple of hours, David finished all the walls on the second floor. So then he started doing the flooring of the second floor, and as soon as he finished the flooring, I then asked him to make the roof to finish off my temporary house. And by the end of day 5, the temporary house was completed. In the morning of day 6, I made a shrine and a backgammon table for David to use during his leisure time, which, again, requires more wood. On the night of day 6, I then planned out a balcony extension for the house. If you've been watching me for a while now, you would know that I would use this as a vantage point to defend against the invaders. On day 7, nothing really new here other than chopping wood, collecting wood, and building. As I was building the platform, I was visited by a fugitive. Her name was Allison, and she was overcome with terror. She begged, "Hide me. I will die if I am caught." And with no hesitation, I decided to help her. Now that there's 2 settlers in the colony, I then made another haybed, and Allison rested the whole night away. On the morning of day 8, I was visited by a negotiator. This was new to me, so I had to check this out. I then tried to negotiate Allison's freedom with all that I have, but to no avail. I guess there's only one way through this, and so I left the negotiator and prepared to defend against the looters. Now I didn't really do much on day 8 other than ask Allison to write chronicles and for David to cut down more trees. So we'll go ahead and skip to day 9. On day 9, we have our first incursion. Coming from the east of the world are 2 looters wanting Allison back. So I stood my ground and asked David to go to the balcony expansion to defend Allison. Now David was no archer, so it was difficult for him to take both the looters down. Luckily for us, our dog decided to join in the fight. Things were getting out of hand, but miraculously, our dog managed to kill one of the looters, ensuring us the victory that day. David was badly injured after the incursion, and so he went up to take his well-deserved rest. And as for Allison, she continued to write chronicles so we can do some research in the tech tree. On the morning of day 10, since I'm living in the mountainous region with a scarce resource of trees, I then decided to plant birch trees near the temporary house. On this day, I also added wooden merlons around the balcony. I also added a small shed beside the house that will contain my stone workbench production. On the morning of day 11, I found out that Allison was a believer of restitutionist, and so I had a shrine also built for her, and for the rest of the day, both David and Allison just worked on the construction needed for the house. On day 12, I followed and watched David as he gathers more wood and finishes the shed for the stone workbench production, as well as finishing the restitutionist shrine for Allison. Day 13, and it was now spring. I finally got enough chronicles for us to research the furniture tech. The reason being I needed more bookshelves for all the chronicles they wrote. I have also managed to get my stonemason's bench up and running. And so for the rest of this day, I watched them turn my rocks into stone blocks in preparation for my future castle's barbican. On day 14, Allison and David have started planting the birch trees. After they have farmed out all the plots, for the rest of this day, I just followed David work on the stone blocks. On day 15, a wounded traveler stumbled upon our town and her name was Agasha. She offered work in return for shelter, and I decided to help her with open arms, because we need all the hands we can get for our future building projects. Later that day, I also made a boyer stable so we can turn Allison and Agasha into archers as well. Day 16 was uneventful, so I just watched Allison make stone blocks and Agasha write chronicles. For the whole day 17, I asked my settlers to gather rocks from the nearby rock deposits, and this was carried over through days 18 to 19. Day 20 was another uneventful day as I watched myself following David lollygag in the first floor of the house. Day 21, I just continued the production on stone blocks and writing of chronicles. I've also decided to mine out the other nearby rock mine, and this was the routine until day 22. For day 23, I decided to mix it up a bit by doing some hunting because my settlers were hungry. We also got visited by a merchant, and so I traded some of our useless resources for 40 gold. And up until later that evening, I continued to deplete the rock mine. If this is your first time hearing of this game, you'll get a lot of uneventful days like this on day 24, where just like the other uneventful days, I just gathered more and more resources. Day 25 marks the first day of summer. I was also visited today by a friendly visitor from the Heresy of the Rose. This must be from the new update of the game, but unfortunately, I haven't had the time to have a druid myself. Maybe on the next 100 days. On the morning of day 26, David finished the sewing station, which means I can provide better clothing for our settlers. I also continued mining the last bit of rock mine near the house, and to finish the day off, I just continued writing more chronicles for our future researches. Days 27 to 28 were the most uninteresting days that have happened so far. Nothing really new happened except for me gathering wood, writing chronicles, and gathering more construction materials for my future building projects. Days 29 to 30 marks the start of my Barbican project. I started to lay out the foundation by putting limestone block stairs that would ramp down from my house towards the lower level, and placing another set of stairs from my house going to the next level. Unfortunately for day 31, my plans for construction was put on halt because I got my very first rebellious settler due to hunger. And so on that morning, I've tasked my settlers to do some hunting. However, later that night, some of my settlers were still hungry and became rebellious, which would slow me down yet again another day. So on the morning of day 32, I tried to balance the work and the food production for my settlers. With my food in check, I then started to lay out the blueprint for the towers of my barbican, and my settlers spent the whole day building my barbican gatehouse for the upper level. On day 34, I then started to lay out the gatehouse for the lower level of the barbican. I also started to make a gatehouse facing the east and the west parts of the map. And my settlers have once again spent the whole afternoon building the blueprints. I spent the whole day 35 building ladder accesses for the towers, worrying about my inventory space, and gathering iron nuggets for the reinforced doors of the barbican. I also built a smelting furnace on top of the balcony, out of reach of any raiders that might attack us, and reorganized my tree farm. And this was carried over until day 36. But before day 36 ends, I have also started to mine out the rocks behind the house, because I will need a hecton of stone blocks for my barbican. The design of my barbican is not the typical enclosed fortified structure. Instead, I opt to go with an open layout structure. So in the same morning, my settlers started to build all the blueprints that I have placed earlier. Later that afternoon, we were again visited by another lone traveler. Osfrith was his name, and he had been bleeding from a deep gash and needed to rest. And so we accepted him in the colony with a brand new haybed. Day 38 was another day dedicated to the construction of the Barbican. I, however, spent day 39 hunting for game to rid my settlers of boredom from construction. But soon after the hunt, it was back to work they go. I dedicated day 40 to more resource gathering for the rocks because I know I would need more stone blocks for the Barbican. I also finished the reinforced doors on my gatehouse on the upper level. I then started to lay out the flooring for the second floor of the Barbican. I continued the construction of the second floor on day 41. And by the end of day 41, this is what I had to work around. Day 42 started with the deconstruction of the old balcony because I had no need for it since I will be using the new and improved Barbican walls. I then marked new rock tiles to be mined out. I have also started to build limestone block merlons surrounding the second floor of the Barbican. And for the rest of the day, my settlers worked on finishing the floorings on the second floor. I spent day 43 producing more stone blocks for the Barbican. I spent days 44 and 45 building more walls around the Barbican and finishing off the design for the second floor, and I watched them build all that I asked them to do. On the morning of day 46, my settlers have completely destroyed the balcony, and I have partially finished the second floor of the Barbican. Day 47 was dedicated once more on the building and beautification of the Barbican. On this day, I've also traded extra resources for 141 gold, which will come in handy for a future event. And by the morning of day 48, the second floor of the Barbican is complete. So now I added the final floors for the last two towers on the south side of the Barbican. Day 49 and we're about to finish with the final construction on the south tower. But unfortunately, I ran out of resources, and so I marked new rock tiles to be mined out by the settlers. While I was working on the construction and the mining, we were then visited by some looters that attacked us a year ago. The surviving looter brought with him 6 friends in hopes to finally get what they want. Thankfully, we have finished the Barbican, so I can use this as a vantage point. Now all there is left to do is to wait for the looters to get close to us. Unfortunately, I didn't see them coming from the north side, so this made me act fast and had to lure them down towards the east wall, where my other settlers are waiting to attack. And since my settlers were not born archers, they had a hard time killing the looters, and so I asked Allison to keep going around the Barbican, while the 3 other settlers picked the looters one by one. After quite some time, we have managed to defend against the looters, and we are fortunate enough yet again to see another day. And now that we're halfway through, I wanted to focus on building the walls around the mountain. But I've accepted that I won't be able to finish this in the first 100 days because of the amount of stone needed, and so I focus on gathering wood instead of stone. However, I still gathered some stones later that day to finish the Barbican. Day 52 was also dedicated to gathering stones for the Barbican. I built a research table on day 53 because I wanted to start researching more on the advanced technologies, and the rest of the day were spent on the mining of stone for the Barbican. On day 54, I started to chop the nearby forest so I can start walling the mountain. And as I was doing so, a hopeful helpmate visited our town. She was keen to learn about us and willing to lend a hand, and all she asked in return was a safe place to call home. We also ran out of hay that day, so sweet loose bed were made out of sticks. I started to finish the towers of the Barbican, and this continued until day 56. On day 57, I noticed that my settlers ran out of stone blocks, and so I mixed it up a bit and turned my focus on building the walls out of wood. The walls expanded until the highest points of the mountain. Nothing permanent yet, but a nice temporary big land to call our own. Nothing much happened on day 58 other than watching my settlers finish the wall. I started day 59 with a good old trading. I traded away anything my settlers didn't need for more gold, and for the rest of the day, again, I just watched my settlers finish the wall, and this carried on until day 60. I felt like making an excavation site for my limestone production, but I didn't want to ruin the exterior of the mountain any further. So I started to dig an underground entrance for all the mining that I will do. Aside from this, I was still working on the finishing layers of the barbican. And that was all that happened on day 61. As I was working on the mining entrance, another traveler happens to pass by our town. She promised to work after she was given time to recuperate. On day 63, I finally started mining through the excavation site. Now surely this would supply all the limestones that we will need. I dedicated days 64, 65, 66, and 67 to mining underground, digging one section after the other. On day 68, my settlers ran out of food, and so I ordered them to hunt a bunch of animals in the wild. On this very special number day, I went back to work in the mines. My temporary house was getting way too cramped. That's why on the morning of day 70, I started to construct new buildings in my walled area, starting with my great hall and kitchen. My settlers also needed a place for storage, and so I built a new storehouse beside the first structure. On this day, I also transferred my birch farm inside of the walls. And to end this day, I finish it off with some good old trading away unnecessary materials for more gold. I spent the whole day of day 72 watching my settlers finish all the construction. I then spent day 73 finishing all the interiors of the two structures. On the morning of day 74, we were visited by a figure from the Church of the Third Coming. He sought an audience to strike a deal with us, but this was no urgent matter, and so I first built my settlers a new sleeping chamber. Once that was done, I then asked David to meet with the figure and struck a deal. This deal, however, required us to give all our gold coins. We did avoid a potential incursion, but at the expense of our settlers' happiness. I deconstructed our temporary house on day 75 to give space to finishing the barbican. I spent the whole day 76 watching my settlers finish their sleeping chambers. Day 77, another day dedicated to hunting to refill our food supply. On days 78 and 79, I also expanded my barley farm inside the city gates, and went straight back to mining and gathering for more limestone. And right before day 79 ended, another settler appeared in our town's doorstep asking for aid and protection from the looters. And in a heartbeat, Dartford's inhabitants decided to help Jill. With the search party arriving in roughly about half a day, I should have prepared my settlers for the upcoming incursion with proper weapons and armor. But instead, they were doing all these unnecessary gardening work, and soon enough later that night, a negotiator appeared at the edge of the world. I didn't have much resources to negotiate with, and so I just focused on expanding the mine, and because we didn't negotiate with them, it was inevitable for the looters to appear at our doorstep. The incursion starts and 12 enemies appeared. The horn sounded and it was time for war, 10 of which rushed the barbican, and the other 2 manning the trebuchets. They started to bombard my wooden walls with the trebs. Oh, I've got a bad feeling about this. I then ordered my settlers to defend from the walls of the barbican. With a lucky shot from one of their trebs, they managed to damage 5 of my settlers. Luckily, no one was seriously injured. And as soon as the looters got near the barbican, my settlers peppered them with arrows. My heart was racing because we were not bringing them down as fast as I would have liked. This is a reminder for me to train my settlers in archery. I was then shocked to see the looters have diverted their attention, not realizing that the trebuchets have already destroyed my wooden walls. But no matter, we've managed to at least take some of them down. It was already the morning of day 82 and we have been breached. No walls can protect us now, and it was time to fight in the open field. One by one, we took them down to the best of our abilities, and by the second hour of day 82, we have won the incursion. We have lost wooden walls, skeps, and blood, but our settlers are fortunate enough to live on another day. A lot were damaged during the war, and so, unfortunately, all the resource gathering and construction were put on hold to give way to the repairs needed in the town. On day 83, I sat back and watched my settlers live their lives and accomplish tasks they were scheduled to do. On day 84, I tasked them to expand the garden and later on expand to the mines as well. I also started building a blacksmith later that night, and since there were roughly about 2 weeks left in the series, I've continued the completion of the barbican. I don't know why, but day 85 feels like it was full of lollygagging. On day 86, I started the day with good old trading, acquiring gold coins, apple saplings, apples, and barley with some of my beeswax. And for the rest of this day, I watched my settlers finish the building phase of the barbican. And all that was left was the west wall. I upgraded my settlers' weapon and armor the following day, turning bowmen to arbalists and changing their caps into light helmets. On the morning of day 88, I've put into blueprint the remaining section of the west wall. And since we were lacking on the stone block resource, I watched my settlers gather more stones from the mines below. And this went on until days 89 and 90. And surely enough, as soon as resources were sufficient, I then continued and watched the construction of the west wall from days 91 to 92. I also built another entrance to the excavation site near the west wall of the barbican, giving my settlers easier and faster access to the mines, rather than the entrance by the south wall. I was also visited by another negotiator later today, and with ample resource to negotiate with, I learned from my past incursion and built a secondary wall to prevent any type of breach to my town. Day 93 was yet again one of those uneventful days, where the only notable things that happened were mine expansion and hunting because we were running out of food. On the first hour of day 94, 11 enemies appeared on the edge of the world, and luckily for us, they didn't bring any trebuchets. I had to cut my settlers' sleep short and ordered them to station themselves on the west wall. And now that we're more prepared than the previous attacks, we managed to cut their troops down one by one, ensuring us the victory by the 4th hour. And sure enough, Dartford's influence was flourishing, attracting both settlers and unwanted attention from neighboring settlements. There was no other special thing that happened this day, so I just spent this day building more storages for my inventory, and eventually building an armorer's table to improve my settlement's armory. For day 95, I just spent the whole day expanding the excavation site. I also built the new mining entrance on day 96, and this went on until day 97. I spent day 98 once again trading for gold coins and some limestone bricks and adding small details to the new mining entrance. Day 99 and all the construction were finished. All that needs to be done now are the writing of the chronicles for the much needed tech upgrades for the next 100-day series. I expanded to multiple mining chambers to increase the supply of our limestone bricks to our ever-demand-heavy Dartford, and watch the sun set on the town as the settlers run their own lives. Our adventure continues, and here we are back in the mines. And yeah, that's all I did for today. No joke. In the following day, I did some math and computed on how many chronicles and textbooks I'd need for the remaining tech we need to research. I then worked the mines once more, slowly but surely excavating the chambers one by one. And this carried over until the following day. But I guarantee you, this wouldn't be enough for the castle and walls I'm about to build in our land. Later that night, another settler escaped from the harsh beatings of a cruel master. She begged us to hide her or she'll die if she gets caught. My conscience will not let me rest knowing that her life is in my hands now. And so we welcome Isolda into our humble but thriving settlement. I started the following morning fixing Isolda's schedule, job priority, and equipment. I then worked the mines again, and that's really about it. Later that night, the negotiator appeared at the edge of the world wanting to make a deal with us. Look, you bastard, we have nothing to trade with you, so why don't you just I have no anger issues whatsoever, I promise. I just hate these looters, that's all. And yes, I did work in the mines while waiting for the looters to arrive. The looters soon arrived at the top of the mountain. How on earth do they have trebuchets? They're just looters. They managed to bring my walls on the north side of the world down, and so I had to move my settlers from the west side to the north side of the barbican. And as soon as the looters were in range, my arbalests let their bolts loose and straight into the enemy's hearts. We're very fortunate that all we lost were wooden walls, floors, windows, skeps, and the campfire. Nothing our trusty hammer can't rebuild. And well, for the remainder of this day, we just worked on the rebuilding and repairs of our settlement. Look at all these wild animals. You know, I really wish the devs put the priority button on the building phase so I don't have to micro this part of the wall. Look, some of you might not agree with what I'm about to do, but I promise you, no real animals were harmed during this recording. I promise.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys!
The repairs and the rebuild of our great hall and kitchen just finished the following day. For today, I've already queued in a lot of the excavation to be mined out, so I'd have more time to do more active things like... well, like watching this fox float on water. Look at those cute tiny legs. Look at that goodest boy. Yes, he is. Okay, I was lollygagging for half the day. Later that afternoon, I actually had to build some bookshelves to store my chronicles and textbooks because it was taking much of my inventory space. For day 111, I just gathered more stone for my wall and castle project, and some more wood as well to support my mines. More mining was done on days 112, 113, and 114. On day 115, I had my settlers build a merchant stall by the city gates because it bothered me that the merchant and his caravan were just going around town. Literally. And once that was done, I did some good old trading. I traded away a heck ton of resources I didn't need for some gold coins. 110 to be exact, and back to the mines we go. I've also made a brewing station in our kitchen because one of our settlers was desperately thirsty. I'm looking at you, Solda. And once that was done, we turned some of our honey into mead. Oh, and we gathered some mushrooms too, cause why not? I considered making my settlers' armors out of gold, just so we can boast to our neighboring settlement that we are thriving. And so I queued in gold ores to be mined out. Day 118 was spent on mining once again. Believe me, there's going to be a whole lot of this in this video. By day 119, we were able to accumulate so much chronicles and textbooks that I just had to research some text on the tech tree. And not before long, another settler came crying at our doorstep. Truda was her name, and she asked us entry, looking for some peace and quiet. Well, I'm not so sure about peace and quiet, but I do need them extra hands for our upcoming building project. So welcome to our humble settlement, Truda. I then spent the whole afternoon fixing her schedule, job priorities, and equipment. Look, you old hag, just like what I told the other guy, we have nothing to trade. Go take a hike, you b****. I'm okay. Really. I'm okay.
Okay.
I queued in some more chambers to be mined out the following morning. Soon enough, the attackers have arrived. 15 enemies appeared at the edge of the world. Luckily, no trebuchets, so we made quick work with the enemies. A thunderstorm occurred that afternoon, and I was just pondering to myself if the amount of stone blocks I have would be enough. Is it? Will it? Well, I sure hope it would. And to be frank, I really forgot what I was doing during this recording, so I had to put this here in my script, laughing face. Okay, I promise, this will be the last few clips of me mining, because in this first quarter of this 100 days, I was also planning and visualizing how I want to build the castle and the walls. I started day 126 with the deconstruction of the wooden walls on the south side of the settlement. Once the wooden walls were demolished, I then tasked my settlers to rid the space of any trees or shrubs. And now that the space was cleared, I started to blueprint the walls. Now for the design, I didn't just want a typical straight wall, and so I made this wall slightly bent towards the western wall. Maybe it would have been better curved, but my wife likes it, Be like my wife. And right before the day ended, I blueprinted as well the second layer of the wall. My settlers then finished all the blueprints in the morning, and by late afternoon, I then tasked my settlers to deconstruct and clear the next layer of walls and trees. And by the evening, they have built the new layer of stone walls. I then tasked them to clear another set of wooden walls, and later replaced with the more durable stone block walls. And by nightfall, the western wall was partially built. In the following morning, I went to work on the southeastern wall, deconstructing the wooden walls and replacing them with the stone block walls. And the next layer on the following morning. On day 132, I've built some floors, deconstructed wooden walls, and cleared trees for the next set of stone block walls on the eastern side of the settlement. All of these were partially finished the next day, and later that afternoon, I've also started to work on the northern wall. The design of this would simply follow the southern wall. And by the morning of day 134, I laid back and watched my settlers build the northern wall. And by day 135, we have completely enclosed ourselves within our walls. I've also started to gather more stones to refill our stock for inventory. On the morning of day 136, I have cleared the forest in the mountains and continued to build the inner wall. Later that afternoon, a citizen of Dartford found a settler faint and bleeding. It looked like he had a wood-cutting mishap, and so we let him stay and heal. Welcome, Bertrand, to Dartford. And soon after, I continued building the inner wall along the eastern side, northern side, and western side. I also had to move my garden because it was in the way of the inner walls. And so on the morning of day 137, I watched all my settlers go to work. And this carried over until the morning of the following day. Later that afternoon, I also watched my settlers finish all the queued mining tasks. In the following morning, I decided to make a third layer on the southern side of the walls, and build another layer on top of the western wall. It's good that we got to finish the walls surrounding our settlement because later that night, raiders appeared at the edge of the world, and so I was forced to wake my settlers up to defend our town. Spoiler alert, they don't break through, so here's another kill montage of that battle. Ah, satisfying. And by the morning of day 140, my settlers have gone back to work on the southern and western part of the walls. And by nightfall, I have also started to add blueprints on the northern wall. I watched them build as much as they could before they called it a day and went back to their night routines. Construction continued the following day, and it took the whole day for them to finish all the blueprints. And finally, I then put the last layer along the east and the southeastern part of the walls surrounding our settlement. I also started to put stairs in between levels. You know, it's been a while since our last trade, so I'm gonna go ahead and do some good old trading. Trading yet again unnecessary materials and resources for gold coin. And I'd finally have 271 gold coins. You think that I'd use this for an upcoming event, right? Right? Wrong. I'm just hoarding it for fun. Someone in the comment section from the previous 100 days also suggested that I make an underground base. So maybe if you're thinking what I'm thinking, you might have an idea what the next 100 day series would be about. But let's not get too excited about it, for we have a wall to finish. I started at the southern wall, then up the eastern wall, around the northern wall, and back down the western wall to complete our wall foundation. I've deconstructed a part of the sleeping chambers of my settlers so that I could complete the walls at the west side. And by nightfall, all the walls have been put up. And all that's left are the floors. Okay, maybe not all the walls, but most of it. and that's good enough for me. I actually didn't see this, but my food reserves were low and some of my settlers were unhappy and starving. And so I asked them to hunt polecats and goats to fix that food reserves are low problem. Well, nothing else happened this day except having more unhappy and starving settlers. And to top it all off, 3 rebellious settlers. Alright, just a few more blueprints and we've finally finished our wall. I won't bore you with the details of this day, not because I know the details of what I did, but because I really forgot what I was doing here. So let's just skip to the next day. But we just got rid of them, On the 3rd day of winter 1356, I've started to excavate the mines another level deeper. Oh, don't mind it. Deep breaths, John, deep breaths. I've also placed in blueprints of wicker floors in the first level of the mine so that I can dig the level below. And we've nearly finished the flooring of the walls as well. I started the following day with some good old trading, getting not just gold coins but also some apple saplings and limestone brick to help us with our supplies for the walls and castle. I then just watched my settlers finish all the construction in the mines for the rest of the day. Day 6 of winter and the day started with a good family meal in the Great Hall.
Nice.
Then it was back in the mines for the whole day, and as soon as they finished with the flooring, I then queued in more stone voxels to be mined out. Yeah, we're mining again. I started this morning by adjusting their work hours, lessening their sleep time to 6 hours, and adjusting their leisure time to 6 hours as well. Hopefully that fixes all the unhappiness we're having in the settlement. I then asked my settlers to cut down any wild trees in our tree farm. And then later that day, I also started to make another mine entrance within the city walls. The next morning started with the digging of the new mining entrance. I've also removed the connection going out the first and the second entrances so that no enemy nor wild animal can enter the city walls. And before we finish this day, I queued in more voxels to be mined out. I added in decoratives that would make it look more like a mine, just like how I did it in the first and second entrances. Then I went to speak to the merchant and traded away beeswax and tallows for more gold coins. And since we're a couple days past halfway through this 100-day series, I thought of boosting our limestone brick production, and so I dedicated the extra room that I had to become a workshop and made 3 more stone masons benches. For day 154, I overwatched my settlers digging in the mines and placed wooden beams to be built so we can avoid unnecessary concaves. Now that we are actually producing enough limestone bricks, I then put my attention back to the walls, putting floorings on the southeastern part of the wall. I've also started to put limestone block merlons on the southwestern part of the wall, and then finished it off with more floorings to complete the battlements. My settlers then finished all the blueprints the following afternoon. Then I worked on the next layer of battlements by adding some stairs, merlons, and flooring. And by the first day of spring, my settlers started working on the blueprints. But before they could even finish the task, a new settler arrived, and her name was Etheldreda, to whom we welcome with open arms. Now go get working! By the second day of spring, I added more merlons, stairs, and floorings to the battlements on the west wall. In the following morning, we were visited by another negotiator. But despite us having gold to negotiate with, I didn't bother because I can use this one whole day of negotiating, working on other things such as building wooden beams in the mines and expanding the chambers to be mined out. And by the 11th hour of day 4 of spring, 17 enemies appeared in the south edge of the world. The horn sounded, and the enemies have started their attack, bombarding the Barbican with their trebuchets. I stationed my settlers on the south side of the Barbican and waited for the enemies to arrive. And once they were in range, we rained chaos onto them. I then changed the variations of the corner pieces of the south wall and the Barbican. Once I was done with the variations and my settlers are done with the repairs after the incursion, I placed more blueprints to finish the battlements on the north side of the wall. I, however, noticed that they were taking a long time finishing this task because when they passed by the Merlons, their mobility is compromised, so they are forced to walk instead of running. And so, as my band-aid solution to this situation, I temporarily put wooden floors to where I would put the Merlons. After that, I then put the limestone block floors in between the wooden floors, and I watched them build the battlements on the northeastern side of the wall. Now, I don't know if this would make things faster, so if you have any knowledge about building in Going Medieval, do comment them down below. And just a quick trade update, before we get back into the construction video, I traded away 1,000,000 resources for 110 gold and 12 healing kits. Alright, maybe I think this is a slower method, but whatever. Once all the wooden floorboards were finished, I then put in the stone block Merlons to finish all the battlements on the northeastern side of the wall. And by the end of spring, my settlers have finally completed the battlements. And before the day ended, I did some good old trading. On the first day of summer, I had my settlers finish the battlements on the southeastern side of the wall. And I had them work on the remaining section of the battlements. It's funny how the small section of wall is taking so long, and you'll see why in a bit. But at last, on the 4th day of summer, my settlers have completely finished the battlements on the east side of the wall. Other than working in the mines and having blighted crops, today is one of those uneventful days. Remember when I said,
"It's funny how the small section of wall is taking so long, and you'll see why in a bit."
Yeah, it's because of this. We lost the wooden ladder in the previous incursion, so that explains why my settlers were going around the longer route to the eastern wall. Ah yes, it's one of those days. Animals are hungry, settlers are starving, and settlers unhappy. And for some reason, I forgot to tell my settlers to hunt for food. And by midday today, another settler joined us and her name was Molly. See, I did ask them to hunt. Only it's been hours way too late.
What the fuck?
I am such a dingus. Now that we've fixed the hunger problem, it's one of those days I dedicated my time in fixing everybody's job priorities. In the morning of day 9 of summer, while my settlers were doing some minor tasks, I observed from afar and planned how the castle would look like. I actually had to take a quick break here in real life so I could plan how the castle would look like. Once I figured out everything, the first step was to evacuate the kitchen and great hall in the middle of our town. The next step was to deconstruct the kitchen and great hall. And on the last day of summer, I started to blueprint the inner bailey of the castle. This would also serve as a choke point for raiders before reaching the gatehouse of the castle. There's also a reason why I made the entryway 4 voxels wide, and it's in preparation for the game's upcoming update. For the towers, I'm using my rounded towers design, so if you've watched my other videos, you would know what I'm talking about. I just noticed how the layout of my future castle intersects with the current building in the town, and so it took me one whole day to reorganize things. And another half a day to destroy the old warehouse. Once that side of town was all cleared up, I went to blueprint the southeastern tower. I've also added in the second layer of the walls of the tower and the interior walls of the castle. But before we could do any of the construction, we were ambushed by the bards. By this time around, I guess you guys are getting used to me getting raided, so I'll go ahead and skip to the montage. Once they have completed all the blueprints, I found myself worrying about our stone block supplies because it would surely not suffice. And due to my carelessness, day 184 was wasted on flooring the mine when I should have been mining the mountain for a resource already. And that carelessness was carried over till the next day. And now that I've run out of sticks, I did more reckless work and gathered trees when I should have been mining the mountain, like I said. These are just some of the things that I tend to forget to think about when I'm playing this game. I just do okay, don't ask me what. And now that I feel like I won't be able to accomplish my task of finishing the whole castle, I saw to it that at the very least, I get to finish the outline of how the castle would look like. I did, however, incur some errors along the way, but no big deal. Good thing my settlers haven't started on them yet. On these days, I have put all my focus, energy, and resources on the castle. You may have also noticed that I have started mining the mountain, so I won't be spending time in the mines for now. Let me actually take this time to explain my castle design here. So in this area where I'm mining through the stone voxels, this would be the throne room. Something similar to when I did my water challenge castle. Now, I'm aware that castle entryways don't directly lead you to the throne room, but it does in my imagination, okay? Can you just, okay?
Okay.
I've also made a minor change here, seeing that I wouldn't like the outcome of it all. So instead of having this section with walls, I deconstructed them and will eventually put merlons once I have enough resources. I know it's a waste of resources, but I was just running out of time and I was getting pressured. Oh, and I got to check out some text from the list. It started snowing that morning, but it won't stop us with the construction. I've started to lay out the ceiling as well for the gatehouse. I've started to clear out most of the rock voxels in the first and second floors. I've also left some unmarked, so I could use them as extra foundation, to save on resources. I also put roof access via the towers so I could finally take the ladders out. We just did some more mining and interior flooring for this day. Very uneventful. I built my brewing station back as well since one of my settlers was so reliant on ale. I'm looking at you, Solda. Again, just more mining. I noticed that my fermenting ale pile wasn't fermenting at all due to the temperature, and so I did any right-minded person would do and built a brazier. And finally, day 200. I know I still have a lot of things to do, and so I just took this time to reflect on this series while my settlers put the finishing touches on the gatehouse of the castle and the inner bailey. And despite the unfinished castle, I was still excited. I just can't wait to see how it would all look like in the end. And now that the game is finally updated, it was time to work on the castle. So in the morning of day 201, I went to the research tab and unlocked defensive structures 3, giving me the tall gate. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough resources to unlock defensive structures 4. Later that morning, I then tasked my settlers to have more voxels to be mined out. I then watched them mine throughout the rest of the day. Day 202 was very uneventful. Other than just working in the mines, I went and set up the blacksmith's forge and the research table. On day 203, I added in the tall gate I just researched. There seems to be a visual bug here, but whatever works, I guess. I mean, it does still look good and is functional. I then work on mining the stone voxels inside the castle later that day. More mining was done on day 204. I continued working on the castle's throne room the following day. I then made an advanced research table. I just noticed this very late, but for this day, I had to do some rebuilding as I had made some mistakes with my blueprint. And oh, I have also started placing the stone block floors and the stone block merlons on either side of the throne room. I have also added limestone block arches to provide more stability for the higher floors of the castle. I also did some of the quick revisions with my blueprint and more mining later that day. Again, I don't know why I didn't see this before, but this tower is one voxel off, so I had to do some revisions with the tower. The northwest tower was now symmetrical with the other towers. More mining was done for the rest of the day. I then went on to blueprint the next level of the castle. Oh, and I didn't mention this a couple of seconds ago, but I was visited by a negotiator yesterday. And so, I was abruptly awakened by the Church of the Third Coming the following day. And for this 100-day series, I didn't want to showcase my defense again. I've already done that in the previous 100 days, so This is probably the last time you'll see this. And I know there's a prisoner system now, but I haven't even scratched the surface of all the roles the devs had to offer before this. But I promise I will cover this, maybe in the next 100 days. After the incursion, I went and blueprinted more walls on the 3rd level of the castle. I added limestone block arches along the other walls, not just for stability, but I really liked this look it had. And I swear this time, I really like what I did here. This may seem not much right now, but wait for the results. You'll see. Feel free to comment your opinions about it as well down below. I then designed the sleeping chambers of the 3rd floor. Now this ain't Sims, so all the sleeping chambers had one design. It would be just mirrored from one room to the other. This smaller room in between the 2 sleeping chambers is not a storage room, nor an aesthetic washroom if that's what you had in mind. But this would be where I will put the shrine, and again, the design would be mirrored on the opposite side of the area, so I could place the shrines of either beliefs per level, providing quick and easy access to one of my settlers' needs. And just in case you are wondering, I skipped through most of the days because it would be just mining. And I wouldn't want to keep repeating myself of saying, and for the rest of the day, I did some more mining. But yes, for the rest of the day, I did some more mining. That's the last, I promise.
Cap.
I just did some more stability work putting arches in the rooms and the common area. I've also started to build the doorway of the other 2 sleeping chambers. More mining was done on days 216 and 217. I built some limestone block merlons on the 2nd level of the throne room, just for aesthetics looks really. And before I forget, I did manage to research the portcullis. And so to complete the look of my barbican, I built one. Oh whoops, I had it on backwards, lol. But something was definitely off. Where's the gate? I remade it just to be sure, and I built it correctly this time. But the portcullis was still not portcullising. Now that I got it out of the way, it was time to focus on the sleeping chambers again. To provide more food and wine options for my settlers, I went on and planted 2 5x5 plots of red currant shrubs. Which, by the way, pro tip, you can amass a ton of this fruit, and it doesn't get affected by blight, or well, never experienced it in my 400 hours of gameplay. I then again placed arches in the new sleeping chambers for stability, and I placed more limestone block floors in the ground floor of the barbican, and the throne room. For this day, well, let's just say I relaxed a bit and just watched my settlers build all the flooring. I know I said I won't say it anymore, but I just really have to. And for the rest of the day, I did some more mining. That's the last. I promise.
Cap.
And for the rest of the day, I did some more mining. Look, I won't say it anymore. I'm pretty sure most of you have the firm grasp of how either mining or logging heavy this game is. Good thing the devs released a patch fixing the portcullis. Look at that gloriousness. Really adds a whole extra level of aesthetics compared to what I used to build. Alright, back to work in the castle I go. And this continued through days 227 and 228. And on day 229, I watched them build the 4th floor of the castle. And again, the following day, I have also decided to not take any more new settlers for the time being. Maybe eventually, when we get surplus for everything. And a very interesting fun fact, in all of my 400 plus hours of gaming, maybe my 10th or so playthrough of going medieval, this is the first time I declined a settler, whether be it free help or save someone. I just felt like sharing, okay? And again, more castle work was done on this day. And since I've done a lot of castle work lately, my supply of limestone block has nearly emptied, and so I went back to the mines for 5 days. No kidding, that brought the supplies back up to about 4,000 limestone blocks. And now that I have supplies, you guessed it, back to castle work I go. And by the 10th day of autumn year 1357, the 4th floor of the castle was almost complete. Now, I just have to fill in some of the stone voxels I mined out, because if I didn't complete the room with proper walls, some walls tend to have the outdoorsy mozzie look. I want to add more floorings later that day as well. And voila, 4th floor done. Oh, whoops, I missed a spot. I then focused on the interior design of the castle. And again, because of my lack of creativity, and to be frank, interior designing isn't really my strong suit, all rooms will eventually look the same, mirrored from one another. Also, I'm pretty sure that the wardrobe is a new addition to the game. Never saw that before. I then went on hanging torches all over the castle. Then, I watched my settlers slowly light up the surroundings of the castle. And by the third day of winter, this is what I had so far. I also started to run out of wood, and so I went on a logging spree, cutting down all adult and dead trees within the vicinity of my city. I haven't done some trading in a while, so let's go do some good old trading. Well, the trader didn't have much to trade, and so I just got their 73 gold coins for some of my beeswax. I have also continued the production of winter clothes as some of my settlers were suffering from the cold. I went on tidying the throne room up since I was already finished with the tech tree. I also replaced some of the limestone voxels with limestone block walls for the rest of the day. And that continued until the next day. I've also decided to have an access way through here, and so I went to dig the room out and added some floorings as well. I was also starting to run out of silver ingots, so I had some more silver voxels mined out. Note to self, go easy on the expansions. I've always been cautious of having concaves. Very unlike me to have overlooked this one. But no worries, nothing we can't fix. Just adding in some more minute details. Nothing new really, just overwatch my settlers. Oop, sorry Osfram, not today. Maybe on your next escape. If you're still alive, that is. I honestly don't know what I was doing here, so here are some snippets of what I did. I then started to blueprint the last floor of the castle, starting with the towers. Next, the merlons. Then, the walls of the castle. And finally, the flooring of the 5th floor. I watched my settlers finish all the blueprints that I had tasked them to do. I then began to work on the interior of the 4th floor sleeping chambers. Nothing new, literally a copy-paste of the 3rd floor sleeping chambers. This was rather an uneventful day, and when I say uneventful, what I mean is micromanaged, like moving the limestone block pile closer to where I'll be building, and putting small stick piles in the castle, so my settlers don't have to travel far when refueling the fires. Again, another uneventful day, just putting more floor tiles on the ground level of the towers. As much as I want my imagination to run free, throne room isn't really a room type in the game, hence why I decided to make my throne room into the Great Hall. The aesthetics still somewhat suit the room type if you ask me. Now that I got most of the building out of the way, it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. For many days now, I've had settlers become rebellious, and mainly it's because they lack food. And most of the time, they lack ale. So, I've began expansions to the basement as well, making the kitchen that will produce tons of food and ale for my settlers. I've also thought about and planned my endgame farming layout. I had no pre-designed layout of how I wanted to make the kitchen, so all the footage here is basically me thinking on the spot for a room design for the kitchen. And spoiler alert, nothing fancy, just a nice big square to house all the production buildings for the kitchen. Today, a lot of mining occurred from different areas, one in the Great Hall, not to mention our kitchen in the basement, and another down in the mines. So yeah, it was one of those days. I did nothing else but mine. And this continued until the following day. I can't really do much in this situation, as the voxels I marked for mining can only fit one settler at a time, because if I were to mine the whole section in one go, I might cause a collapse within the castle. And spoiler alert, I still did. I guess my pillars and arches in the Great Hall are too far away from one another. I watched my settlers mine, and slowly but surely, the kitchen was taking shape. Some of you might think that I should be using the new prisoner system, where the jailor can assign prisoners to mine on behalf of my settlers, and you would be right. But as of this recording, despite having a settler fit the requirement, I didn't have the other requirements. Soon, I will utilize all the roles the game has to offer. Stay tuned for that. Aside from just waiting for and watching my settlers to finish mining out the room, whenever I could, I would blueprint the walls and supports of the room as to not waste any time, because I'm sure this would take at least another day or two to finish. Mining and construction continued for the rest of this day. And with just a few more voxels, the kitchen will be complete. Next step would be the interior. But before I could even start with the interior, I noticed a collapse had happened. And so I turned my attention towards the collapse, rebuilding and strengthening the foundation as much as possible. It took me half a day to repair all that broke in the collapse, but soon after, I focused on the kitchen, putting flooring, and placing all the blueprints of the production buildings for the kitchen. I never used the apothecary bench before, so I don't know if it should be here in the kitchen or in the workshop. Let me know in the comments down below. I then mined out a smaller room to store the carcasses from my hunts. Not only that, but I also expanded towards an underground freezer for my food stockpile. Better late than never, eh? I have also mined out another section where I will put all my fermenting ales. The theory here is that I'll be able to control the heat output with a single brazier in the middle of the room so I can make fermenting faster. Once that was in queue, I then micromanaged all the production buildings so I could fully automate the production of food and other byproducts in the kitchen. I started this morning blueprinting the walls of my cellar. And all that's left were the rocky soil voxels that I had put on queue to be dug out. And soon enough, my cellar was done. I finally have a proper place to produce ale and beer for my settlers. Now that I'm finally expanding towards an underground freezer, 5.5 in-game years late, I also built myself 2 ice boxes to produce ice to keep our freezer cold throughout the year. Hopefully, 2 ice boxes would suffice. I also got to finish my storeroom for the carcasses I would obtain from hunting. Nothing much happened this day other than just to mine out the freezer. And yet again, I dug out more of the rocky soil voxels, and later turned them into limestone block walls to have a cleaner look to the Great Hall. I have also decided to tame these 2 sheep so I can have a steady source of wool. Of course, assuming I keep them alive, that is. Other than my usual tidying up and micromanaging of the place, I also made this small shed to store my hay. This would also serve as a food storage for my flock of sheep. It was more foundation and stability work for me this morning, building more support beams at the second level of the Great Hall. For the longest time, this floor has been empty, and it took me quite some time to think about what to put here. And eventually, I thought of putting a king or a queen's chamber, just for roleplay's sake. And 2 other rooms, namely the library and the infirmary. I have just gathered some wood to replenish my stock, and the 5th floor remains to be empty as I have still yet to think about a proper design for the interior. And while my imagination works at the background, I also micromanage some of the production buildings in the kitchen. Still no hint of creativity flowing yet, so I just worked on the castle's last layer, the roof. And now that I was experiencing support issues again, the creativity in me started to flow. I've started to place in arches, but even then, I wasn't 100% sure of the placements. I'll fix it eventually. I then blueprinted the 2 remaining towers of the castle, and by midday, I worked on the merlons surrounding the roof. I have also continued finishing the whole look of the castle, putting merlons on top of the towers, and fixing each corner piece of the merlons. And as well as putting the last layer of flooring. And I did this with the 3 other towers. Then I just watched construction until nightfall. Construction of the roof and the last layer of the towers continued through days 280 and 281. I have also started digging another basement, and this time this will be for my workshop. I have started expanding on the freezer one layer of voxel at a time, making sure I don't cause any concaves. I also found myself running out of materials to finish the castle, and so for the rest of the day, I just mined it away. Oh hey, it rhymes! Pretty uneventful day today, so for the rest of the day, I just mined it away. And for the rest of the day, yeah, I'm getting sick of it. More mining was done today and on day 286. And since the mines heavily relied on wooden beam supports, I replenished my stock of wood by cutting trees near my castle. I know I said I wouldn't show any more incursions, but I just want to point this out. Some of you may already know this, but I just recently found out that building moats slow down the enemies tremendously. I just found it cool, okay? And because I just came from a recent incursion with trebuchets, most of this day was spent on repairing all the walls that has been damaged by the trebs. And later that day, I attempted to fix the support for the roof by making new arches and destroying old ones. And once the new supports were placed in, I then continued to construct the roof. I find myself in the basement working on the new room, the workshop. Again, nothing extravagant or anything, just a nice big rectangle to house all my production buildings for the workshop. And by the end of the day, the freezer was fully mined out. Now I just need some flooring to keep my food from spoiling. And once that was done, I then put the stockpile for my ice blocks to keep the overall temperature of my freezer cool. Next was the most tedious thing, transferring old shelves I had located in the walls into the freezer. But I'll save you all the burden and skip through the work. And by the following morning, all shelves have been transferred. I had some more space, so I added in a whole lot more shelves, also separating meals, raw foods, medicines, and seeds from one another, just to make my freezer neat. And now that my settlers have cleared up some space, I blueprinted the outer walls of the workshop. I also placed in the supports of the workshop, and by the 6th day of winter, all support beam and walls have been constructed. That just means I can start digging the rest of the rocky soil voxels. And by the next day, I've added in the flooring. And by midday, transferred in my current production buildings like the armorer's stable, stonemason's bench, and sewing station. I've also added in the bowyer's stable, blacksmith's forge, woodwork bench, 2 braziers, and some tool shelves to complete the workshop. And again, I just queued in a bunch of production to fully automate my workshop. I also expanded into another big room beside the workshop. And this would be a storage room for different materials needed in the workshop like leathers and ores. Next on my agenda was the library. Again, transferring old research tables and wall bookshelves that I've had for a while now into the new library. I've also added in 2 braziers and a whole lot of bookshelves in the library. Now across from the library is going to be the infirmary. I've placed in 5 infirmary beds and some medicine shelves to complete our infirmary room. I've also put in a table and chair just for aesthetics and roleplay's sake. I'd like to think that there's a doctor or healer that would be working inside the infirmary. And later that evening, I put in a royal bed made from wool for my city's future king or queen. Comment down below on who you think it would be. David, the founder and a true pioneer, the very first settler Dartford has had for 5.5 years now? Or Isolda, the colony's drunkard? Kidding aside, this would be a nice role to have in the game in my opinion. Maybe a ruler could automate some of the things like negotiating deals from one kingdom to another. It's just a thought. I then focused back on the workshop storage room by placing in walls that I would have arches connected from one another. Now, I know there's still a lot of things to do in the city. Well, for instance, fix the hunger issue I'm currently having with proper farming. And not only that, but to also explore the new role system we have in the game. After all, that's what started this whole series. But before that, I do have 2 more builds in mind, and it is related to the different roles we have. And if you haven't guessed it yet, it's going to be a church for the restitutionists and a temple for the Oak Brethren. But more of that starting tomorrow. So, I'll start today by actually doing what I said that I would do, which is exploring different roles. And first on the list is the warden. One of the prerequisites is that the warden must have his or her own chamber. And so I focus on building a chamber in the mines below. And because of popular... And because of popular demand, I've decided to rename Bertrand here to Shimmy. Yeah, Shimmy suits her better. You're no captain though, but you are going to be the colony's new warden. Oh, and spoiler alert, yes, I did make the mining chambers into prison cells, though I'm pretty sure you only need one room for all your prisoners. But I'm here to make things look good, so yeah, I made multiple of them, but more of that later. I have also expanded on the chamber just to have enough space for Shimmy. I later on changed the wooden walls into limestone block walls, because my jailer deserves better. She already is living under the mines, might as well make her chamber as comfortable and as pretty as much as possible. It took the whole day to also lay in the flooring, but safe to say that I've finished the room today, and all that's left for the interior furniture. So, as I've mentioned not even a minute ago, here I am making the different mining chambers into prisoner cells. I've outfitted each room with a prisoner stash, prisoner cell marker, torches, and a hay bed. Not even sure if that's necessary though, and with those built, Shimmy was officially named Prison Warden. Congratulations! I also started to finish the interior furniture for the Lord's room, and I honestly believe this room is rightfully David's. He, after all, is the founder of Dartford. I've also done some hunting later that day because people were starting to get hungry. I know, it's another thing I said I would do. And I will, I promise. The next thing I wanted to get was the bard. And the prerequisite of that is to have a great hall. So I was adding in the things that were needed to finally make this room a great hall. I also did some micro work on the schedules of my settlers. I've assigned dedicated cooks and have scheduled them to start their days earlier than the rest to get some food cooking for the rest of the colony. Aside from that, I've also continued working on the Great Hall, and I've also started to mine out the rest of the storage area beside the workshop. Again, I find myself fixing my settlers' schedule and tasks, assigning roles to respective settlers such as the cooks, the farmers, the builders, and the miners. I left the hauling to my dogs. I have no idea why this was still not a great hall. I know I put everything needed for the room type. Oh, I found the culprit. Silly me, I didn't notice these shrines stuck behind these walls and floors of the castle. And now that I finally have a great hall, I then assigned Osfrith to be a bard, entertaining settlers and guests during feasts with lovely music or some dramatic poetry or storytelling. But he was neither of the latter, so more of just music really. This will go down in the chronicles as Dartford has hosted its first feast on the 8th day of spring of year 1359. And why was there a feast, you might ask? Well, I have some spare meals and ales now, and to that the colony has earned to feast. And just really to see what it looks like. Oh, look at that! That's so cool! Everybody's enjoying each other's company while Osfrith is playing the lyre in the background. And just like that, the first feast was a success. Nice! Okay, you might think that I'm lollygagging here, but I swear I was not gagging on some lollies.
It's kinda sus.
That came out wrong. As the next one I'm considering was the chaplain. Now why a chaplain and not a druid? Well, it's also been brought to my attention that it would be best for the colony if we just focus on one religion, because if both were present, then the settlers would just keep on jumping from one religion to the other. And that really made sense to me. And so just to be lore-friendly as well, I thought that it would best fit that a mini church would be built inside this walled fort of a city. And well, since there's going to be a new project, we all know what comes next. The activity that we all know and love. Mining. I also took out the hill at the back here, just decided to not want it there anymore. The following morning started with the construction of the storage room for the workshop. How much y'all bet that they'd leave one? They always do. You know, one of these days, the devs would give us an answer why that is. The following morning started with the digging of the hill I queued a couple of days ago. And soon after that was done, I then queued the other part of the hill that expands towards the east side of the castle. I'll need a whole lot of space for my farming. Later that day, I was also notified that Shimmy was eligible for a promotion. And so I made her into a warden too. Congratulations! I also wanted Osfrith to get the promotion, and so I looked at the requirements of the bard too. Other than serving 4 more days as a bard, I'll need to put a wall mirror in his room. And it looks like his speech level is about to hit the minimum requirement as well, so I'll have to work on that by making Osfrith do all the trading that needs to be done in the settlement. I don't exactly know which item gives me the greatest amount of XP per transaction. All I know is that I have a lot of excess beeswax to trade, so I traded a lot of it away. Also to make space in my storage room. Then it was just mining from dusk till dawn. And again the following day. Blighted crops did however disturb me midday, but nothing we can't handle. And by the next morning, I worked on mining the stone walls of the northeastern tower and turned them into limestone block walls, just to make things neater and pleasing to look at. I was torn this morning as I had to choose between Jill and Sweet Lou in becoming the settlement's chaplain. But one thing's for sure, I'll need to have a restitutionist chapel built first before I could promote either settler to become a chaplain. While I was out back digging stone voxels, an extortionist arrived and appeared at the edge of the world. You know this would be a perfect opportunity to finally get some prisoners, so I'll look forward to that. Alright, just to explain what I'm doing here, because you'll see a whole lot of this much later, I'm removing stone voxels and exchanging in dirt voxels, so I'd have more fertile soil to plant my garden for the endgame. And oh, Osfrith is eligible to become a bard too. And so I did. Congratulations! Well, nothing much happened today other than working on the garden soil, so I'll go ahead and skip through today. Well, that was very uneventful. So much for looking forward to the first prisoners. I paused the game for today because I wanted to lay out the chapel I was building. If you've watched some of my old videos, this chapel might ring a bell. If not, then I'll go ahead and link that video over here on the top right corner. Again, just to explain things, the back room is where the chaplain will be living. The middle part is where the actual activities would happen. And the smallest square as well, aesthetics. That will be the bell tower. Now don't ask me why or where the bell is in the game. Churches and chapel IRL in general have bell towers. They just do okay. I've also dug out a small area in one side of the chapel which I'll put the stairs in. 2 sets of stairs will be built along this side of the chapel. One set going up the bell tower, and the other set leading down towards the burial chambers for our settlers who have gone ahead of us. And those voxels that I dug around the chapel, I will fill those in with the soil and eventually plant red currant shrubs surrounding the chapel. Now enough explaining and more building. Once all foundation have been built, I then laid out the interior furniture such as the Church of Restitution wall decoration, a large restitution shrine, and the restitution lectern in the main chapel. I also put the interior furniture for the chamber of the chaplain. This room would have the same things as the other chambers have, just to avoid jealousy amongst my settlers. And by nightfall, I've laid in the roofing for the sleeping chambers and the second floor for the restitution chapel. And this carried over until the following day. The restitution chapel felt a little empty, so I placed in 2 more restitution shrines right beside the 2 sets of stairs. And by the 10th day of summer, it was time to work on the roofing of the chapel, and as well as the 3rd floor of the bell tower. And by the next day, I finished the roofing of the bell tower. Later that day, the restitution chapel was completed. Well, technically. I dedicated today to tidying things up and planning the courtyard. For the courtyard, I first laid out limestone block floors that would connect the castle and the chapel. And yeah, no, that was it, lol. For now, that is. I also decided to transfer Osfrith's room from the 3rd level of the castle to the 1st level of the castle, because it would be in the same level as the Great Hall, where he would be working as a bard. And so, I got to working by placing in a door and queued in the voxels that need to be mined out for his chamber. Today, I worked on the backyard garden again, replacing stone voxels with soil voxels. I have also laid out some flooring in Osfrith's room as well today. With Sweet Lucius a practicing restitutionist and Jill a restitutionist zealot, the choice was a no-brainer for me. Congratulations, Jill. You are now the colony's chaplain. I then decided that on the 5th day of autumn of year 1359, Dartford will have its first Eucharist event. Not really sure what I'm doing here, but I'm adding all the wine that I can until I've maxed out the event quality. And once that was done, it was time to start the Eucharist event. Alright, so far it feels like a meditation thing. Everybody's just gathered to pray while the chaplain is leading the prayer and then also has the action of swinging a thurible back and forth. Cool! I continued to work on Osfrith's room the following day, so that I could also finally move Etheldrada to Osfrith's old room on the 3rd floor of the castle, and finally destroy the old hut my settlers have been using for the past 200 days. I also felt like I needed more manpower in the last few days of this series, so I was back recruiting any settlers that came by knocking at our door. Welcome, Osborne, to the city of Dartford. Well, I don't have any more space inside the castle, so I guess I'll just have to make you and any future settler that I'll add a small settlement right outside the city walls. Finally, I've also got to finish Osfrith's room today. Well, technically, just a few more walls and it's done. But I've started placing in the furniture of the room. The attackers following Osborne finally arrive later that day. But I'll skip out on the killing as I'm looking forward to the first few prisoners I'll get. Well, that's not right. No prisoners? Really? Guess it'll be one of those if I can't have you, no one can type of situations. So I made sure to kill them all. By the way, we almost lost David during the incursion, but luckily, he just got injured and not killed. It would have been too soon for Dartford to lose its king. By the following morning, the old residential house was demolished, and I was a few walls away in completing my curtain walls, something I didn't expect to say 200 days later. I have also added in a couple more limestone block floors in the courtyard that would eventually lead into the garden. I've started laying out the fences that would space out my garden neatly. Also, to stop the spread of any blight. This was also a better way for me to just dig what I had to dig, since I don't need all voxels to be soil anyways, since some have fences and some will have paths on them. I did more garden work the following day. I've also thought of placing my skeps here in the middle of my garden, so I built a nice little hut to cover the skeps from the rain. Again, more garden work was done today, setting garden plots to priority for my farmers and filling in mined-out holes with soil to be used for more farming. And this carried over until days 338 and 339. I noticed some of my settlers were getting annoyed because they are not able to worship their deity. And well, like I said in the beginning of this 400 days, I want Dartford to be predominantly restitution worshippers. And so I decided that day, I will try to slowly convert those who still worship the Oak Brethren by holding a Eucharist event and inviting everyone to partake in this event. Out with the old and in with the new, as one would say it. And while that was happening in the background, I went on and worked on the fences in the garden. And by the following day, this is what I have blueprinted. Now I wanted to beautify the place a little bit more, so I thought of making these stone voxels into dirt as well, so I can plant more red currant shrubs, and as well as apple trees. I've also started to mine out the stone voxels inside my garden plots as well. And for the rest of this day, I just overwatched my settlers accomplish all the tasks I've queued for them to do. I've also started to lay in windows in the towers. I just thought that the towers needed a little more oomph to them, and not just regular stony walls. To ensure my settlers' safety outside of the castle walls, I had to mine and dig out any voxel that can have access to them. Now, I just hope no incursions will occur while I'm still doing this. Again, just more garden work here. And another uneventful day for today, just overwatching my settlers once more accomplish their tasks. I also thought of changing the variations of some of the corner walls just to add more details, other than just having them blocky and boring. And I finished the day with more of the garden work. And that carried over until days 347, 348, and 349. And because I've ran out of soil, it was time for me to get soil from somewhere else. So I've started mining this small hill to the east of my castle. I spent this morning fixing the prioritization of each farm plot in the garden. I've also started to relocate some of the skeps from the animal pen into the garden. And by midday, we were visited by a negotiator from the clan of the Ravagers. And I say let them come. And now that I've got some more dirt in my inventory, it was time to go back to my gardening work, filling in the holes with dirt voxels. And by afternoon, I was working on the last bit of garden plot. Soon I'll have plenty of crops and vegetables growing in the garden. Oh right, the Ravagers. Well, they came, and we did quick work with them. And finally, prisoners. Now I must admit, I forgot how to use them as laborers, so don't expect much. They literally were just extra mouths to feed for the rest of the playthrough. You know, I honestly thought that Shimmy brought all 3 prisoners to the cells. But apparently not. Well, at least we got one. Nothing else happened this day other than the most notable thing that I did, which was to relocate the skeps from the animal pen to the garden. This was also the first time I was visited by a friendly merchant. He says he has some friends looking for work for a fee. Man, 200 gold? These are very expensive laborers you're asking me to employ. I'll take some of your gold and I'll take the cheapest one. And because of the recent trade, Shimmy is now eligible to become a Warden 3. Well deserved. Congratulations. I wanted to change the front door here, but since the game wouldn't allow me, I'll put back the old design. If it's not broke, don't fix it, I guess. And, well, for the rest of the day, it was more garden work. In the following morning, I also promoted Jill to Chaplain 2. Congratulations. I also experimented with the mechanics of the Warden. Like I said, I wanted to make them mine for me, but I simply forgot how. I do apologize that you guys won't see them mining here. Maybe in my underground base series. And because Osfrith needed just a few more levels for his speech skill to be promoted to Bard 3, I did some good old trading. I traded for heaps of items for my own heaps of items.
What?
The trade just took that long, okay? I didn't want to itemize each one. What's important is now I got Osfrith's skill up to 15. Just 5 more to go. And before the day ended, I promoted Jill once more to Chaplain 3. 2 promotions in a day. Congratulations! It was time to go serious mode on my food production. To start having a dependable source of food, I've started to plant different types of crops and vegetables in my garden, like carrots, cabbages, and barley, just to name a few. And because I went serious mode yesterday, I went on focus on finishing this last garden plot for my barley mixed with apple trees farm. And that carried over until the next day while I was fixing the variations of the limestone block floor paths I had going through the garden. I was bothered again with some of my settlers being unhappy because they couldn't worship their Oak Brethren deity. And so I hosted another Eucharist event today only focusing on the settlers who are worshipping the Oak Brethren. I've decided to put the small restitution shrine over here so that my settlers will not have to go to the church or to the 3rd or 4th floor of the castle to worship. Aside from this spot, I'll also spread them around the vicinity of the settlement as well. See, look at that, being used already. Nice! I overwatched my settlers plant carrots and herbs the following day. I also instructed them to mine out the last bits of stone voxels in the garden. I find myself once again fixing my settlers' schedule this morning. I just couldn't get the hang of it, really. It feels like you'll always have to keep on adjusting their schedule, especially if your settlement gets bigger and bigger, and with more things to do. And no joke, this is the only thing that I did for today. Well, that and trading. Only 4 more levels to go. Since I didn't have any access to a bunch of barley, I made these 2 medium fields into flax fields first. Now, I didn't really have the need for extra linen, but whatever, maybe I could trade them in the future. I also remembered that the windows have variations now, and so I thought of playing around with them, and I must say, I like how it turned out. I honestly might keep using this kind of design in my future playthroughs.
It was perfect. Perfect.
Alright, just a few more and my garden will be complete. I also began removing some red currant shrub plots and will exchange them for some apple tree plots, so that my apple trees are scattered everywhere in the garden. It felt kind of dark here too, so let me just go ahead and place some torches around the shed. Again, just more garden work. I also hosted another Eucharist event today, but this time around I had a guest chaplain from the Faithful Sons of England. But it felt weird because he was an Oak Brethren zealot. Not sure if this was a bug, so I just made him participate instead of leading the ceremony. You're not converting us, boy, we'll convert you. And everyone had an unforgettable experience with today's event. I'll go ahead and skip today because this is all I did for the rest of the day. And since I was always running out of wood and sticks, I'll make a bigger tree farm right behind the small settlement outside the castle walls. Hopefully that would produce enough wood and sticks for my kingdom. And finally, I've done the lower part of the barley farm. Time to add in some apple tree farm plots. I've also decided to move the flax fields over here. And yes, I will turn the other two medium flax fields back into barley fields. Time to add in the barley fields. Before the day ended, again I traded away my heaps of stuff for more heaps of stuff. And only 2 more levels to go before Osfrith can become a Warden 3. I wanted to add a little something to the sides of the church as well. So I started to do some little gardening work here once more. I thought of adding another shrine here as well, just to make the need to worship their deity more accessible all around the castle. And now that they've filled in the hole, I put 2 apple tree farm plots and filled the rest of the space with the red currant shrubs. I honestly don't have any idea what I was trying to accomplish here because I find myself jumping one place to another, simply waiting for all the tasks to be done. I also wanted to move my merchant stall somewhere in the vicinity, and so I expanded the paths to the left of the church. This will be like a mini plaza of some sort, having a bonfire in the middle of the market, or, well, in between 2 merchant stalls. And speaking of bonfires, I wanted to add one in the Great Hall as well. And so I demolished the 2 innermost sets of stairs and built a new set in either side. And once those were demolished, in goes the fire pit. These chairs and table also need a revamp, so I'll be changing them to a more comfortable and more aesthetically pleasing set of table and chairs. This happened overnight. And well, I'm just happy it's not spreading all throughout the garden. And with just enough chairs built, our Great Hall was built again. This is what I mentioned not a minute ago. I'll be adding in 2 merchant stalls in my mini plaza, and eventually, after all the variation changes to the floors, I'll be adding in the fire pit. Honestly, it would have been better if there's like a fountain type of building, but this will do for now. There we go, and since traders are here, I'll have Osfrith trade some items so I can finally promote him to a Bard 3. And because it's been a long while, and since we've completely decked out our Great Hall, I'll be hosting a feast in honor of my hard-working settlers. Look at that, everybody's so happy. If only it was always like this. No drama, no chaos, just pure bliss. I've also started to mine through here to lessen travel time from the courtyard to the Great Hall. The roof of the castle seemed dark, so I had some braziers built. And by some, I mean a heck ton of it. I also got another settler. Boyd was his name. And well, I'll need all the extra pairs of hands I can get to help finish all that I have to do in these last few remaining days. And so, I built another house in the settlement outside the castle walls. And by the end of the following day, they were about 60% done with Boyd's house. Desperate times calls for desperate measures, and that's what I did today. Because I couldn't wait anymore for the next trader to come by, I got my things and went to the neighboring city just so I can get Osfrith's speech skill to 20. I didn't know my animals could climb ladders. And finally, as soon as Osfrith got to his location, the trade takes place. Once again, trading most of their items for more of mine. And with that, Osfrith finally levels his speech to 20. Now come back home. And while I was waiting for Osfrith's arrival, the Ravagers attacked us with a vengeance. It's already late at night and a man short, but rest assured, I made quick work with the invaders. And because last night's incursion had trebuchets with them, I spent this whole day repairing walls, floors, windows, and doors. So I'll skip right through this day. But before I do, I promoted Osfrith to Warden 3. Congratulations! Not gonna lie, I expected them to be done with the repairs by now, but no. No one has work on Boyd's house, so I'll skip to the next day. Oh, lol, I didn't even notice that the trebuchets have managed to break through some of the flooring of the eastern wall. Let me just patch that up right quick. Now I was just analyzing something here, because for some odd reason, I'm having issues with food production, and at this point I was just making packaged meals. And one of the resources for the packaged meals was fabric, in which my settlers must go back to the ground floor, only to go back down the other side into the storage room, get leather, and then go back up to the ground floor, only to come back here in the ground floor kitchen. Clearly something must be done here. So in the following morning, I went and dug an access-way from my fermentation room into the workshop. Surely this would make some difference with the food production. I've also begun hunting to resupply my stock of meat, just to make sure I have enough food to be made into packaged meals. My meal stockpile was still dwindling, and so in the early hours of day 387, I had to micro David into cooking meals, one after the other. And here you can also see the pathfinding David makes in getting the resources needed for the packaged meals. And finally, after 10 in-game days, Boyd's house was finished. Nothing else important happened that day as I see myself just observing and micromanaging their lives in the kitchen. Ay, you nitwits. Why are you planting when there's a cold snap taking place? And again, more micromanagement in the kitchen. I feel like towards the late game, when you finally built the kingdom of your dreams, it will all boil down to food management, which includes the production of food, whether through hunting or farming, which really is the endgame dilemma. Need I say more on what I'm doing here? But kidding aside, at least they've started to work on the accessway I've tasked them to dig out about 4 days ago. And oh, I've also tweaked their schedules for the nth time. I haven't talked about this part of the castle, but I was finishing the entire look of this tower, and unfortunately, I have caused a concave. But nothing our trusty hammers can't fix. And they also have finished the mini accessway connecting the kitchen and the workshop. Yay! And while I was queuing in more stone voxels to be mined out, another settler came knocking at my doorstep. Osbert was his name, and he was seeking protection from the Society of Fellows. And with the addition of Osbert, it was time to make another home. Nothing really important happened in between the speed build and this, so don't worry if days are passing by quick. And alas, an incursion occurs. The Society of Fellows appear on the edge of the map determined to kill, burn, and destroy anyone and anything in their path. But I don't think they've met my impregnable barbican before, and because this would be the last time I will be showing this, for old time's sake, here's a kill montage of the incursion. Satisfying as always. No new prisoners and one got away to tell the tales of the battle at Dartford 1361. Oh, I didn't even notice it that they've already finished Osbert's house. Nice! The next few days are pretty uneventful, as I just worked on this part of the tower here on days 394, 395, 396, and 397. What can I say? I was really determined to finish it. And after I finished that, it was once again time for rejoicing and celebrating. This would be the last time Dartford would hold a feast. And to make things even more special, we had a special guest that performed in the feast, giving Osfrith a much-deserved rest to be one with the townspeople of Dartford. With the last few days rolling in, I actually have no idea what else to do for this series other than to just plant, I guess. But making another 100 Days series dedicated to planting is pretty boring. I don't think anyone would actually enjoy watching that. And if you do, what's wrong with you? And for one last time, I've also held Dartford's last Eucharist event. Unforgettable indeed. So I guess this is it. This is the end for this Going Medieval 100 Days series. I would say that I've done everything that I can do in the game, other than to make a temple, use the gallows, and have the prisoners do the mining work. But aside from that, I started out as a lone wolf in hard mode, survived for 400 days without losing any of my settlers, have built an amazing castle, and promoted 3 settlers to max roles. I must say that making this type of content is really creativity heavy, something I ran out of and must take a break from for a while. So, is the next video going to be another Going Medieval 100 Days series? Most probably not. But will there ever be another 100 Days series? Yes, of course. I just don't know when. But until that day comes, I hope you guys will continue to support what I do. I'm Imatiro, and I'll see you guys in the next video.